Hey guys, and welcome back to the channel. Now, as you know, there are a lot of EV trucks being launched right now in their final production form, and in this video we're gonna have a look at two of them, namely the Chevy Silverado EV and of course the Hummer EV as well. I'm gonna compare them in their spec and tech, and then of course gonna jump into Photoshop, have a look at the front, the side, and the rear, and then I'm gonna let you know which one of these two I would buy based on the design. So Chevy will launch the 2024 Silverado EV exclusively as a dual motor truck with a motor powering each axle, and this of course gives it all-wheel drive. The base truck will be rated at 510 horsepower and 615 pound-feet of torque, and that's just the base work truck, while the top spec RST will have at least 664 horsepower and 780 pound-feet of torque. This is going to be a beast of an electric truck because 0 to 60 is going to take around 4.5 seconds, and the estimated range of the Silverado EV is 400 miles. So that's on paper at least. We do know as soon as these go out into the world, into the hands of real drivers, that estimate is probably gonna go down closer to maybe 320 or something like that. And if you tow, it's gonna go down a lot more than that. Lower power models featuring two-wheel drive are expected to go on sale shortly after the launch of the work truck and the RST. And pricing for the Silverado EV, it starts at $40,000 for the work truck, and then it goes all the way up to $106,000 for the top of the line RST version. So there's a huge gap there from the work truck at $40,000 to the RST at $106,000. Looking at the entry-level Hummer EV2 and the EV2X, they will both get two motors as standard with 625 horsepower and 617 pound-feet of torque. The top EV3X and the Edition 1 adds a third motor, so you have one on the front axle and two in the rear, giving this beast a power output of around 1,000 horsepower and 863 pound-feet of torque. And as you know, electric cars, the torque comes instantly, so you have 860 pound-feet of it from the moment you just press the gas pedal. And this will launch the Hummer to 60 miles per hour from standstill in just 3 seconds in this big truck, which is insane. And the range is said to be 329 miles on a full charge, which sounds a bit more reasonable than the 400-mile estimate of the Silverado EV, but I guess we're gonna find out when they go out on the streets. The base Hummer EV2 is expected to start around $80,000 with a dual motor setup. However, if you want to add a third motor and 1,000 horsepower in the top trim, that's gonna cost you $110,000. Now let's jump into Photoshop here and let's have a look at these designs, because they are kind of similar, but at the same time they will appeal to two very different groups of drivers or truck drivers. I think let's start with the Silverado EV up here up top. It has a very stylized approach to the design. It's a lot more curvy and maybe a little more emotional than the Hummer EV. For example, looking at the front end, we have a curvature here in the front end. Then we have some horizontal lines to emphasize the width of this truck. Since it is a truck, I think it suits to have a lot of horizontal graphics in the front end. This area right here, this headlight, this is actually the headlight, as you know, sitting right here in the bumper, and this is just the daytime running lights up here. But the headlights seem a little messy to me, the shape of it. I'm sure it's super functional and the positioning of it is great. You're gonna have a nice strong beam straight forward in this vertical surface of the front end, but the shape of it, the graphic outline of this thing looks a little messy. It looks almost like just a blob that's just stuck onto the front face. Other than that, I think it's a cool looking front end, and you can definitely see that it's a Chevy. If you mistake it for anything else, all you got to do is just look for this illuminated Chevy logo right there in the front end. Now, comparing this to the Hummer EV down here, you can see that this is, I would say, a lot more purposeful in its design. And what I love about the front end of the Hummer is that you can instantly see that this is taking a lot of inspiration from the previous old Hummers, and there's no way that you can say that this is anything else but a Hummer. And same thing here, you have the illuminated center graphics right here that spells out Hummer in the front end. You also have this age-like daytime running light right here, which I think is really a cool detail, adds to the branding of the car. But looking down here, this is where the big difference is between these two trucks and what they're actually made for. I think the Silverado EV is going to be more of a traditional truck to be used on roads, specifically looking at this bumper, because the bumper sticks down pretty far here, so the ground clearance is going to be good, but not as great as the Hummer EV. Because look at the bumper here and the section that's been taken out of the bumper right here to give it a massive ground clearance in the front end. This entire front end, the tire here, is almost entirely visible, the front of the tire, which is going to give it a nice approach angle when you're tackling off-road obstacles and so on. Then you have this plate here, protective plate down here with some tow hooks as well. I'm not sure you have tow hooks here on the Silverado EV. I can't really see any. So it feels like this is more, the Silverado is more for an on-road approach to truck driving, while the Hummer EV doesn't stay away from its legacy of being a proper off-roader. And I think this is going to be just a beast off-road. I'm a little bit worried about the range when you're doing off-roading, but I think with 329 miles, it's not going to be too bad. So let's have a look at the rear here, because this is interesting too, because the width of the bed right here between these two rails, this is exactly the same between the two trucks. And I do love this new taillight design of the Silverado. I think it looks so much better than the internal combustion Silverado, even the new 2022 models. What I don't like about that taillight is same thing here. We have two graphic elements. We have the top part right here, and then we have the bottom part of the element right there. In the internal combustion engine, what this is, these feel like they are almost the exact same graphic features, and it makes the rear end look a little static to me. Here, we have some more dynamic movements in this graphic feature. We have this light here, for example, stretching further forward, going into this fender line. So we have a connection between the actual body panels and the graphic elements, which I really like. I think it creates a nice flow in the rear end. I also like the simplicity of the tailgate. There's not a lot going on here. And what you want to do when you have a truck like this, when you're designing something like this, you want to focus mainly on the function and not so much on the styling, specifically in the bed area and in the deck lid area. And I think Chevy is doing a great job, and not just with the design, but also the branding of Chevy. These taillights, same thing here. It's hard to put these taillights on any other truck than a Chevy. You're gonna recognize the Chevy Silverado by looking just at the graphics of the taillights, which is a really good idea from Chevy. Now looking at the Hummer down here, we have a different approach to the width of the entire car, the track of the car. They have the same kind of width between these two rails. As I said, this width and this width up here is the same. However, the stance is a lot more wide on the Hummer. It has longer control arms here in the rear, which sticks out further, creating a more planted look here than we have on the Silverado EV. And that again feels like it's more angled towards an off-road approach to what you're gonna be using your Hummer for. Same thing here, a very simplistic design in the deck lid. I like that they have the same style of graphics in the front end lights that they have in the rear end as well. And I also like that they just spell out Hummer EV right there proudly, that this is a Hummer EV and nothing else. And the departure angle here as well, comparing it to the Silverado, which has more of an overhang, which we're gonna have a look at in the side view in just a second. It feels like, again, this is a proper off-roader, while this is more of an on-road truck. And you can see that right here in the press photos as well. You have the Hummer on some gravel off-road trail, while the Silverado EV is cruising comfortably on some tarmac right there. Looking at the side view, this is also interesting because they look very similar, but at the same time they have a lot of differences. If you look just at the wheels, you can see that this is a more of a road wheel comparing to this beefy off-road tire that we have on the Hummer. But again, looking at the greenhouse, this section is super similar between the two trucks, and the D-pillar looks very similar. And even this angle in the greenhouse, you have this little kick up right there, which we have in the Hummer EV as well. Both of these looks really cool. It kind of depends on which type of person you are. If you want a comfortable road-going truck that you're maybe not gonna take off-road so much, or if you want a proper off-road truck like the Hummer EV. The big changes in the greenhouse here is obviously this angle right here compared to the more stylized, more curvy angle of the Silverado EV in the front end of the greenhouse, and that goes all over this truck as well. You have the same kind of feeling in the front end here with a more architectural approach of the Hummer EV. So which one of these would I choose? I mean, to me, there's really no question which one I would pick between these two. I'm gonna go for the Hummer EV, and preferably the tri-motor with 1,000 horsepower. I've seen the launches of these things and it just looks unreal, because you can't imagine a big mass like this exploding from 0 to 60 in a way that the Hummer EV does with the 1,000 motor setup. And overall, I do like the Silverado EV. It looks more of like a traditional truck, and I've always been a fan of the functionality of the Hummers, and now that they have it as an EV, it becomes even more attractive to me, and especially since they took a lot of design inspiration from the old legendary Hummers that we're used to seeing for decades going back.